Alright, so I got an absolutely wild story here for you guys of a very wealthy individual with connections to AIPAC, which is a pro-Israel lobbying group here in the United States, who decided to basically offer bribes to other candidates in current US elections to drop out of their races in order to pose a direct challenge in the House of Representatives towards Rashida Tlaib, who is the only Palestinian American member of the US House. So here from Common Dreams' Julia Conley. She says, AOC says that $20 million offer to unseat Tlaib exemplifies corruption of our politics. Yeah, to say the least. So let's read a little bit of the details here. They say recent news out of Michigan, where actor and union organizer Hill Harper is running for U.S. Senate, and Representative Rashida Tlaib has recently angered pro-Israel lawmakers and donors for her staunch support for Palestinian rights, offered an illustration of the corruption of the American political system, said one progressive House member late on Wednesday. As Politico reported, Harper recently rejected, good for him, $20 million from an anti-Palestinian rights entrepreneur, Lyndon Nelson, who offered the money in exchange for Harper dropping out of his Senate race and running instead against Rashida Tlaib. They say the offer came on October 16th, the day that Tlaib joined Representatives Cori Bush in introducing a resolution to back an immediate de-escalation and a ceasefire in Gaza, right? So that pisses a lot of people off who are very pro-Zionist, pro-Israel, right? When you call for a ceasefire so that more Palestinian kids don't get their heads blown off, that kind of pisses off some people on the opposite side of this equation. They say the blockaded enclave was then 9 days into a relentless bombing by Israel, which was launched on October 7th in retaliation for Hamas's attack inside southern Israel, but had already killed nearly 3,000 Palestinian civilians, including 1,000 children at the time. Obviously, the number is far more, than that at this point. The latest numbers that I've seen is over 20,000 total killed, with over 8,000 children killed. But they say that Tlaib, again, the only Palestinian American member of Congress, has been the subject of vitriol from lawmakers who believe that the U.S. should continue supporting Israel regardless of what human rights groups and the United Nations have warned may amount to war crimes in Gaza. I mean, calling this war crimes even, that to me is an understatement, right? We know that there have been war crimes that have been committed with the targeting of hospitals and UN shelters and schools and refugee camps and all the rest of that. But this is really an ethnic cleansing. This is a genocidal campaign that we are currently witnessing right now. So the idea that the only Palestinian American representative that we have in the entirety of the United States gets up and calls that out and sticks up for Palestinians who have basically nobody speaking on their behalf in the US, that would somehow result in this massive financial onslaught to try to unseat her is obviously disgusting for so many different reasons. They say earlier this month, 22 Democrats joined Republicans in voting to censure Rashida Tlaib for using the rallying cry for Palestinian rights from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Which again, obviously this is something that you can interpret this in the worst possible light, and you can say everybody who believes that from the river to the sea, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, obviously, Palestine will be free. Well, they want to kill all the Jews. That's how some people would want, guys like Richie Torres, right, would want you to believe that phrase is meant to be interpreted. But as Rashida Tlaib is using it, obviously it just means Palestinians in this region, whether they're under Israeli-controlled current, the borders with inside Israel, or they're in the West Bank under Israeli occupation, or they're in Gaza under an Israeli siege, they deserve to have human rights. That's what it means to the overwhelming majority of people who use this phrase. And our government, Republicans and some Democrats joining them, decided to censure Rashida Tlaib. Censures are not something that happens all the time, right? This is a pretty rare occurrence, and they decided to go out of their way in order to censure her for using that phrase. Just completely fucking insane, right? They say pro-Israel Democrats are reportedly searching for a candidate to primary Rashida Tlaib, and last month, according to Politico, Nelson reached out to Harper offering $10 million in bundled donations directly to his campaign and $10 million in independent expenditures if he would agree to be that House candidate instead of continuing to run in his Senate position. And obviously, as AOC points out here, the fact that one U.S. wealthy person can just make a call to somebody and try to fucking launch this bribe to get them to challenge another member of Congress because they personally don't like their politics, it kind of gets to the core rot of the American political system, right? That we have a political system that is essentially entirely dictated at this point by the wealthy, by millionaires, by billionaires, by corporate interests. This is how our government runs. I mean, it's not a mystery. This has been very obvious for years and years and years. But with stuff like this, it's just right in your face, right? Your average American, right, cannot just make a phone call to a Senate candidate and say, I want you to drop out and challenge this other person because I personally don't like their views on this single issue. They would carry no weight. But this kind of a thing does carry weight because guess what? You have $20 million to go and finance their potential challenge to that person. I mean, it's just such a grotesque, corrupt, in your face, brazenly corrupt political system that we have here. They say Nelson has been involved, of course, with the powerful American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, in the past and has donated to both Republican and Democratic lawmakers. So, keep in mind, AIPAC does not represent Jewish people. It does not represent Jewish Americans or Jews anywhere. This represents the government of Israel, okay, which is a very different thing, right? And that obviously ties into like the conflation, the inaccurate conflation of criticisms of the government of Israel with anti-Semitism, which is what basically it seems like a majority of our government seems to think is the actual case. This is the same line that the ADL pushes as well, the Anti-Defamation League, with guys like, Jonathan Greenblatt at the helm, where they come out and they have these critiques for anybody who shows up to a Palestinian protest and they say, oh, well, you must be anti-Semitic. You must hate Jewish people because you believe in Palestinian human rights and freedom and dignity. It's so completely absurd at face value. Now, of course, AIPAC pushed back. And they say that they absolutely, we're not involved in this in any matter, okay? We don't know this guy, even though he was deeply involved with our organization in the past. We don't know anything about this. We had nothing to do with this. He hasn't donated to us recently, obviously. And so AOC turned around and used the I think you should leave meme and said, we're all trying to figure out the guy who did this, right? If you haven't seen that show, highly recommend it. But anyway, it's Tim Robinson, great show. But she points that out, we're all trying to figure out the guy who did this. Okay, you can deny it all you want, but this is exactly what you guys do. This is your MO, is you challenge anybody who stands to criticize Israel. That's what you guys do. That's the entire reason that this organization exists in the first place, right? They say that Harper, who is running for Senator Debbie Stabenow's seat against the more conservative Representative Alyssa Slotkin, who is a CIA cutout, by the way, echoed Ocasio-Cortez, saying that Nelson's rejected offer exemplifies a broken political and campaign finance system that is tilted towards the wealthy and the powerful. And so this is one of the tweets that he put out here responding to the original Politico story. He said, I didn't intend for a private phone call to turn public, but now that it has, here's the truth. One of AIPAC's biggest donors offered $20 million if I dropped out of the U.S. Senate race to run against Rashida Tlaib. I said no, I won't be bossed, I won't be bullied or bought. So good for this guy. I don't really know much of his other politics, but given the fact that he didn't take this money, given the fact that he seems to have a solid critique of Israel at the very least, good for him for doing this, and all credit where it's due. Now, we also had another example of this, because apparently this guy, this billionaire Nelson, or this millionaire, I don't know if he's a billionaire or a millionaire, but this wealthy motherfucker, okay, was going around and offering this to multiple different people, including this guy, Nasser, who was basically posting this video here describing exactly what happened. So let's just go ahead and watch this real quick.
I was offered $20 million to withdraw from the senatorial race and run against my friend Rashida Tlaib. The pro-Israel lobby will go to any length to remove anybody from the U.S. Congress that has any opposition to their agenda and their total, unequivocal support for Israel, good, bad, or indifferent. We need to make sure that money is not the main catalyst to get people elected, because the pro-Israel lobby is only tool, and what they use to threaten politicians is the amount of money they're going to spend against them or for them. America, let's come together and elect people who truly represent our values.
Okay, so again, they're offering multiple people this fat stack of cash. Now, I also want to point out, as he referenced here, the amount of money that is dumped in by groups like the DMFI Pact and AIPAC and J Street and all of these other groups. It does have an influence, right? So I also wanted to touch on an example of how that influence is sometimes wielded. So if you guys remember John Federman, and I've talked about him during this latest Israel-Gaza saga, he has been absolutely abysmal, like as bad as a human being can possibly be when it comes to being a pro-Israel sycophant, day and night, right? He has had absolutely no critiques whatsoever for Israel. He has followed fully in lockstep with every bit of propaganda and narrativizing that they want to put out there. He literally threw up an Israeli flag to pro-Palestinian protesters who tried to confront him. He had some guy thrown out of a restaurant who was trying to ask him completely fair questions about all of this. So, I mean, listen, this guy, John Federman, incredible disappointment. It's not a secret because we knew going into this Senate race against Dr. Oz that he wasn't great on Israel, but I honestly did not imagine that he was going to be as bad as he has been. Now, a little bit of an explanatory factor here in terms of why that may be. Well, if you guys remember, he was running against the more corporate Democrat, Connor Lamb, who wouldn't have been better on Israel, nor would Dr. Oz have been better on Israel. Obviously, John Federman has pretty solid domestic policies and everything. But, I mean, this kind of explains it, right? It seems like John Federman was so terrified of the money potentially flooding into this race on behalf of Connor Lamb from groups like AIPAC, from groups like the Democratic Majority for Israel, etc., that he quite literally let them write his policy in his campaign for Israel. So a little bit on that here from Slate. Going back further to when Federman was running against Connor Lamb in the primary, The Intercept reported that the future senator allowed the Democratic Majority for Israel, DMFI, a PAC formed in 2019 as a direct response to percolating anti-Israel sentiment in leftward corners of American politics, to make edits on his Israel-Palestinian paper, or position paper. The reasoning, reportedly, was to prevent both DMFI and AIPAC from wreathing Lamb with funding. Neither group ended up spending money on the race, which likely helped Federman. Okay, so I mean, listen, this is why John Federman has this position right now. Unless this is ideological for some other reason, it seems like this is pretty, transparent corruption here, right? He was scared of a bunch of big money groups like AIPAC and like DMFI that operate on behalf of the government of Israel, so he switched his positions. He literally let them write his official policy position for his campaign. I mean, it's fucking pathetic, right? But again, it also ties into how deeply rotten our political system is, where lobbying groups on behalf of a foreign government can go and scare a politician into supporting everything that government does. I mean, think about if this was like China, for example, or Russia, right? Imagine if there was a pro-Russia or a pro-China or a pro-Iran or a pro-North Korea, right? One of America's baddies on the baddie list, right? Imagine if they decided to fund a lobbying group in the United States that was openly advocating on their behalf and started flooding primary races in the United States in order to get more pro-Russian or more pro-China or more pro-Iran or more pro-North Korean candidates elected into office. Okay? I mean, would anybody stand for that in the US? Would any of these motherfuckers, these corporate Democrats or Republicans, they would be freaking out if that was happening. But with Israel, it's like this bizarre exception here. People just think that's normal, that groups that their entire purpose is to advocate on behalf of a foreign government's interests, not just a foreign government, but a foreign government that is in apartheid, that is doing an ethnic cleansing, that is committing widespread war crimes, that is engaging in genocidal actions in Gaza right now. They are able to operate on behalf of that government and their own policy in order to influence U.S. policy on the matter. Okay, not to mention Joe Biden himself, which was also a massive recipient of pro-Israel lobbying funding and protection. I mean, it's just the entire system is just rotten to the core. I mean, look at this here from Truth Out. AIPAC is set to spend $100 million to unseat lawmakers critical of Israeli crimes. And I'll finish off with this just as a reminder to maybe some liberals out there who just, their focus is on defeating Republicans and they hate Donald Trump and everything. Well, AIPAC, they fund a lot of MAGA people, right? They fund a lot of election denialists, as pointed out here by If Not Now. AIPAC money fills the coffers of over 100 insurrectionists, people who would see American democracy eroded under far-right theocrats. It is not anti-Semitic to speak out when AIPAC endangers Jews right here in America. So, I mean, there you have it. Listen, this group AIPAC, again, they do not represent the Jewish people. They do not represent Jewish Americans. They don't even really represent Jewish Israelis. They represent the government, the far-right, theocratic, ethnic cleansing, genocidal government of Israel. That is what they exist to do. They exist to make sure that there cannot be any valid criticism from U.S. lawmakers that is levied against this country. That is their purpose, okay? So you can engage in actions that terrify certain members who are running for Senate, for example, like John Federman, into following in accordance with everything that you want them to say. You can threaten to try to unseat other lawmakers who are critical of Israeli politics, and this is how the fucking U.S. political system works. I mean, it is just totally and completely broken.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying